All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's the day after Thanksgiving. I'm broadcasting live. You may be watching at a different time, a different place than you were the day after Thanksgiving, obviously. Hope you had a great day and evening feast yesterday. Hope you had that opportunity. I did. We had friends over, we had relatives over, and it was very, very nice. Also, I have to say, I enjoyed taking a day off from Halitics. I love doing Halitics, and I would have done it yesterday if there was a need, but I didn't think there was, so I didn't. And I have to say, I enjoyed getting that break. So, there it is. If you want to join me, 240, that's what I do differently. We talk about that a lot. That's what I do differently on Halitics is I take your calls. 240-363-7190. Would like to get more, would like to get some. So you got to check in at some point. Let me know you're watching, you're on board. Got a concern raised yesterday by one of my guests who noted that it was hard to find my channel, my YouTube channel, because they were going to the channel that has my actual full name, at Hal Ginsberg. And that is not where, obviously, I do my live stream. I do it at Halitics. I like the name a little better. I think it's a little catchier. So there we go. And I use at Hal Ginsberg solely for personal projects and some of the organizing that I've done in the past. But for the weekday live streams that I do, Halitics is where you want to go. And again, you can join me anytime. 240-363-7190. We'll get into the topics of the day. It is Friday, so there should be a free-for-all. Didn't call it a free-for-all. Called today's program Something to Be Thankful For. And, of course, that is a reference to the holiday we just concluded, Thanksgiving. And so what do we have? Well, the thing that I focused on so much on Halitics has been of late the Palestine, you want to call it Nakba? That's the Palestinian word, the Arabic word for catastrophe. And it has been used since 1947, 48 to refer to the actual establishment of the state of Israel. And it is so sad, so unfortunate, because this could have been an opportunity, I believe, for some kind of rapprochement, for some form of, and by the way, rapprochement between Jews and Muslims and Arabs wasn't necessarily essential. In many areas for centuries, perhaps for millennia even, Jewish and Muslim and non-Jewish Arabs had been living in close proximity throughout the Middle East. Relations were very frequently much better between the Arabs and their Jewish, mostly, I guess, Hebrew-speaking neighbors, although many of them probably spoke Arabic as well, and the Muslims, once that religion was established and spread throughout the Middle East. And Jews often got along much better than the Christians in neighboring Europe did with their persecuted, the ones they persecuted themselves, Jewish neighbors, townsfolk, etc. So it really could have been an opportunity for these two historical monotheistic religions in the region to have actually gotten along really well. The people who embrace both, but instead many Palestinians were actually pushed out of what became the state of Israel, or once it became a state in 1948. And this was overseen by the Brits, the UN, and others. And the theory, I think, was actually, there was good intentions, to the extent there can ever be good intentions where you move people out of their historic homes. The good intentions were, hey, no group, no religion has ever been targeted the way the Jews have been throughout your recent European history, going back to the Middle Ages, to medieval times. No religion has ever suffered the way Christians have oppressed Jews in Europe for 1,000 years, culminating in one of the greatest crimes ever committed by humanity, the Holocaust. So we feel really bad. We shouldn't have done it. So let's give the Jews their own country in another continent, right? Europeans did this to Israel, to Jews, the people of Israel, the children of Israel. So let's give them Israel in Asia. That was kind of the atonement. Of course, a much better atonement would have been some type of, I don't know how you would do it, but some type of establishment of a Jewish state, or a state truly free for all religions in Europe. But that wasn't going to happen. So nearby Israel on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, or the then Palestine, was chosen for the, it was a historical, made sense biblically for that to become the Jewish state. And it did, but what was so tragic, of course, is that so many Palestinians were pushed out. Others became really ultimately second-class citizens. And if it hadn't gone down that way, if there had been some kind of insurance that all who lived in that region would be protected, that their religious freedom would be guaranteed, that there would be a real, true economic security, I think we would be, without question, in a much, much, much better place. But right now, there's more Nakba going on. And what I said to be thankful for yesterday, and there you can see that, I guess that's the Fifth Avenue parade with the turkey. The first hostages were released. So that's very, very good. 25 hostages, including 12 Thai citizens and 13 other women and children, were freed, Egypt said. And there was finally the ceasefire beginning today, Friday, rather than yesterday. There had been hopes that it would happen yesterday, but it did not. Israel continued its bombardment of Gaza. So for now, I think people can breathe a little easier for a few days. And then if you live in Gaza, you look back up in the sky and you'll see bombs raining down on you, missiles. You'll see IDF troops in your city, in your community in Gaza. So the tragedy will continue. I would hope, we can only hope, we can cross our fingers, maybe there'll be talks and the ceasefire will be extended. We'll find out. So the good news is no killing now, humanitarian aid being delivered into Gaza. And for that, all I can say is, yeah, that's good news. It's the best news we've had in quite a while from that torn. I really don't want to say war-torn, because I've said before, I don't really view this as a war. It's not between two roughly equal countries. It's not even between two real countries. Gaza is a oppressed or persecuted area that Israel oversees. And now Israel is just decimating it. This deal, just a few little points. This is all from the New York Times. A lot of the stories I'm going to talk about today are from the New York Times. This deal has raised hopes of the families of those taken hostage. Remember, we talked about this. Those of you who think Israel somehow justified, who believe, well, it's really bad, we wish those poor Palestinian children weren't being killed and the babies in the incubators weren't being relocated to Egypt. We wish the hospitals hadn't been bombed, but, well, what are you going to do if you're Israel? I mean, you've been attacked and you've got to defend yourself. And you've got to get those hostages back. Well, again, the hostage families, as we've pointed out several times on Halitics, don't want the killing of Palestinians to be the actions of the Israeli government. They want it to stop. They don't want more people killed. They've seen their family members taken hostage, others killed. They don't want more killing. They want peace. And they've said that over and over and over. They petitioned the Netanyahu government, and now they are hopeful. So again, this ceasefire, temporary though it may be, is very, very much welcomed by the most obvious victims, the real victims of the Hamas attack on October 7th. What Israel has been doing up until now has been directly contrary to their wishes. They have not been acting whatever you may believe, whatever you may have heard, whatever you may have read, whatever pro-Israel people have told you, this is not what the true victims, the victims in the truest sense of Hamas, have wanted. They don't want this. They didn't want this. They wanted peace. And hopefully, maybe, doesn't look like Netanyahu or the right-wing Israeli government is interested in peace at all. There's no price that they're willing to pay for peace. It's not peace at any price that's being sought. It's peace at zero cost whatsoever. That's what apparently Israel wants, or at least the leadership does. Again, hopes are raised. What else are we learning about the Israel-Palestine conflict, or Israel's persecution, military occupation now? Just a little more about the Al-Shifa hospital. We know, by the way, after Al-Shifa, Israel's also attacked other hospitals, including the Indonesian hospital. And that's not the only other hospital. They've targeted a number of hospitals and have not, as far as I've read, demonstrated that there was any real military value to those targets. They have not found what they claimed, what they were confident, what they were certain they would find in the wreckage of the buildings that they've destroyed. So here, Israel says it destroyed a tunnel underneath Al-Shifa Hospital. I thought this was very, very interesting. They destroyed the tunnel. And again, the New York Times, CNN, I'm not loving their coverage. It's clearly slanted in favor of the Israeli extremists. No question about it. But I also don't accept what some have argued, that the Palestinian side is completely absent from the media. That's not correct. The New York Times, BBC, CNN are at least manifesting real skepticism, and it's very, very much warranted, of the Israeli position. And this is, something we have to recognize and be grateful for, thankful for, that our media, as co-opted as it is by the corporate elites, as corrupt as it is by the richest, most powerful, and most highly educated, whose interests so frequently conflict with the rest of our population, with the rest of Americans, they are providing us with important information. The New York Times reporting 3 hours ago, maybe 4 hours now, because I cut this out of the newspaper maybe an hour ago, saying, yes, Israel destroyed that tunnel. Now, I thought that was really, that just immediately, caused my antenna to go up. The claim that they had destroyed, that Israel had destroyed the tunnel. Because what I would have expected, what you might have expected, especially if there was real evidence, corroborative evidence, that Al-Shifa Hospital was a front for Hamas, that you would never destroy that tunnel, right? You'd take a gazillion pictures, you'd call media in, you would touch nothing, because you would want to be able to claim very, very persuasively that we had to attack that hospital. We had to kill many of the wounded and injured, the wounded who were there, the sick who were there. We had to rout out children, women, etc. Because this was really a command and control center. This is where Hamas, where the Hamas brain trust were operating. This is where they were killing Israelis. And they did announce they destroyed that tunnel, and that they had said that it was part of their complex. They have asserted, for weeks that that's where Hamas operated. So again, why would you destroy It's like they're destroying the evidence, right? Isn't that, if someone destroys evidence, does that mean that you believe the evidence was there? If they destroy, they claim, they say, oh, we had all this evidence that, your family member was murdered by your next door neighbor. But unfortunately, we destroyed the evidence, so we're just going to go ahead and give the neighbor a fair trial and then kill them, execute them. Would you believe that? Would you be like, oh, well, maybe I want to see? If you represented someone as a lawyer who was charged with a crime and you said to the police, well, what evidences do you have? And the police said, well, we destroyed it. You'll just have to take our word for it. Would you be like, yeah, no, right? You would say, no, I don't take your word for it. I don't take the prosecution's word that they just simply, by mistake, oops, we destroyed the smoking gun that tied you to this crime. No. So I think we all need to be very, very skeptical. As you see, the New York Times is. Israel's assertion that this tunnel reflected the Hamas command and control center, proved it. According to the New York Times, you can see how skeptical they are. They're very nervous. That a lot of the advertisers obviously are pro-Israel supporters. It's part of the New York Times is absolutely part of the neocon, neo-lib elites. So it's hard for them, right? I mean, they risk advertising dollars. They risk significant advertising dollars. They risk having Maggie Haberman repeatedly called on to CNN, helping boost their sales. So the New York Times is going to bend over backwards, I guess, to give Israel a fair shake. And they note that their assertion was partly bolstered by the military's subsequent discovery of a tunnel beneath one section of the site. Well, we saw the tunnel. We saw the hole. The military also distributed security camera footage, which it said it had discovered elsewhere in the site, which seemed to show two hostages being led by forces in a hospital complex. Remember, the BBC, when it played that video, it explained exactly why that video is not proof positive, is not particularly persuasive. That there were, it was edited, even though Israel said it hadn't been. That there were different, the first video showed one gunner and then the second showed two in a particular cell. And even of the hospital, and even if indeed there were weapons in the hospital, those weren't just plants by the IDF. That doesn't justify, under the Geneva Conventions, the steps that Israel took. So the New York Times, BBC, CNN, you don't even have to read between the lines, clearly not accepting that somehow Israel has proven they had a legitimate reason to target al-Shifa. And I've said this before, I'll say it, even if they did have a legitimate reason, that doesn't mean you get to do it. There were other steps you take so you don't just destroy the people who were in that hospital. All right, we got a little bit of noise coming in from our caller. Let me see if I can just reduce that. I don't think you're hearing it, but I'm going to see if I can. Well, it's going to be tough. Let me see if I can turn it down this way. I'm getting a little noise there, caller, if you can hear. Let me see if, I don't know if folks are hearing that or not, but it's, all right. Well, we'll get you on in just a sec, John. Now I got you. Hey, John, so before I get you, just want to finish off the discussion here of that al-Shifa hospital attack and the allegations by Israel that they've proven somehow that it was really being used for Hamas, by Hamas. Military did take several journalists in the tunnel. We discussed that, released footage of the site of the tunnel, but they have not shown evidence of the other complexes they claimed were in the hospital. And the one that they did show, they've said, oh, we destroyed it. Sorry, now we can't let you in to enter and assess its use. It's BS, right? I mean, it's just clearly not credible what Israel's saying. They're trying to come up with any justification, any ostensible reason for killing over 13,000, almost completely civilian population in Gaza. All right, we've got John. Let's go to you, John. Let me see if I can unmute you. There you are. John, good day. How are you? And I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, it was great. Yeah,
awesome.
Good day. Well, I was calling about, the comment that Rashid Tlaib, is that how you pronounce her name?
I say Tlaib now. I used to say Tlaib, but now I'm sort of soft pedaling that and saying Tlaib because that
Tlaib?
seems to be the proper way. So Rashida Tlaib.
Rashida Tlaib. Okay. So she made a comment, Palestine from the river to the sea, and it offended a lot of people. And I was just thinking, to me, that kind of means like she believes that, well, I mean, you can look on a map and see that area was Palestine. That's what it was called. It was under Ottoman Turk rule, but it was, a nation nonetheless, a very poor nation. And to me, what that means is that it sounds like she wants a one-state solution, like you, and there's nothing wrong with that, It just sounds like that's what she was saying, and that the state is Palestine, and that they deserve their representation. I mean,
100%, John. I don't see what's, the expression, as I understand it, is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Now you can interpret that, anyone can interpret anything any way they like. That's why I tend to try to really just look at the words, the dictionary definitions of words, and then not worry so much about trying to come up with subtext and supertext and all that, because people do that to suit their own purposes. So I rather look at the words. Now, I do think it's fair to say when Palestinians are shouting that, they're saying, well, wait, this used to be our land and now it's not. So for us to be free, we have to have it back. And, Israel says, no, you don't get it back. But the answer has to be, as you said, as Rashid says, as I believe, has to be a one-state solution. I don't know how else you can do it at this point. And I'm certainly not going to condemn, even if the Palestinians, John, are calling for some kind of, reestablishment of a Palestinian state that excludes the Jews who live there now. I wouldn't support that. I mean, that they live, you have to make, just like the Europeans who colonized the United States, we're here now. We're not leaving.
Right.
We have to figure out a way to treat the natives better, the native population, original. But the same with Israel, Palestine. Okay, you got 4, 5, 6, however many million people live there. They all have to have self-determination. They all have to have equal rights under the political, and they all have to have religious rights. To me, that's a one-state solution. I cut you off there, John. Go ahead, please.
No, it's okay. You used the analogy that, if anyone believes that the Jews have to leave Israel or Palestine, it stands to reason that you would think that all the white settlers have to go back to Europe from the United States. So it's like, they're born there. It's home now. But yeah, I agree with you. I think a one-state solution is the best way for there to be peace there, and with proportional representation, and integration. And I think that the one thing that stamps out hatred is living next door to the people that you think you hate. And then you kind of realize that, oh, no, I guess I don't.
Well, I agree it would stamp it out if everyone had reasonably equal economic opportunity, reasonable economic and equal political rights. The problem is if you live next to somebody who has an awful lot more than you do, and it's not, and you don't think it's fair, nobody will ever think that's fair, even if you could argue it was. So if the Israelis and the Palestinians are living next to each other, and the Israeli income is 10 times that of the Palestinian families are going to get pretty darn resentful. And, the way humans are, there'll probably be increased criminal activities. And then the Israelis will say, hey, they're all criminals. So that's why everyone has to get a reasonably equal sized piece of the pie that is enough for them to survive on. That's my view. I will not, I'm open to a lot of opposing viewpoints and hearing evidence to different argument, different solutions. I don't see a lot of solutions where that will ever last unless everyone has enough and no one has too much, John. That's why I do this.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, do you think that she has to worry about AI PAC? I mean, I normally don't make many donations in election cycles. There's just, I'll donate to Bernie and AOC, and somebody has to really, I have to really feel that they're there and speaking on my behalf, and I think that Rashida Tlaib does a good job.
I say Tlaib, but I think it is mostly Tlaib. That's what everyone. I don't. It's spelled Tlaib, so I'll go with Tlaib. I'm gonna, John. I never ask people I certainly never ask someone to support my program. I'm comfortable. I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. I don't want people who, many of whom have less than I do, to ever feel they have to give to support me. I hope I get advertising dollars. I'll take that through YouTube. And one of the reasons I actually left organizing, because I was a organizer for 4 years, I just hated to solicit people for donations, whether for my organization, which is a nonprofit or Revolution, or even asking them to contribute to other politicians. In regard specifically to Rashida Tlaib, my understanding is she's in a safe seat. You can look this up. The one squad member, certainly AOC, is totally safe. There are two squad members, as they're so called, that I think have something to worry about. The one who's most at risk is Ilhan Omar. And I like her. I met her. She was very sweet to me. Just her personality was so kind, and she was soft spoken. She was, I liked her. I don't always agree with everything she stands for either in terms of politics. I believe she may be at risk. Jamal Bowman, I believe, is at some risk in New York State. I'd feel less positively towards him. And Summerlee in Pittsburgh. I don't love any of them. I like Tlaib by far the most of those three. And then Summerlee. I don't think you have to worry about Rashida Tlaib. If there's another squad member that you really like, I would Google them and see if you think they might be at risk. I don't think Tlaib is, though. I could be wrong.
Okay, so
my sense is she's in a secure place.
Okay, so Ilhan Omar is the most at risk?
I believe so.
Okay, all right. Well, it's good to know. Yeah, I want to, what little I have to donate, I want to make sure that it goes to the right, goes to the best possible place. For sure.
And let me say on that, John, man, look out for number one, dude. I mean, people have millions of dollars and they want to buy, add to their condo in Vail. Then I'm like, no, you could use that money for a better purpose. But people who are, just, have enough, don't give till it hurts. Do not only give enough so that you feel good about it, but you don't hurt yourself. That's my belief. And, obviously we're talking people with millions of dollars. It's a different calculus.
Well, the nice thing about a lot of these candidates like AOC and members of the squad is they say, if you can afford to give $1, give $1. If you can afford to give $5, give $5. It's just what you can afford to give. And if I click on the one thing I don't like with I can't remember what it is, like Act Blue, they'll send you a survey. How do you feel so-and-so is doing right now? Or how do you feel about this issue? And then you click on it, you answer the question, and they're like, great. Would you care to make a small donation of $100 to, it's like.
They suck you in, man. They suck you in. No question about it. That's all part of their techniques. By the way, John, it's great to hear from you. I hadn't heard from you in a few days, so I appreciate your taking the time and the opportunity to call. Thank you.
Yeah. I've been like my van overheated and blew a head gasket, and so I had to go up to San Jose and buy a truck. I was like frantically searching for a vehicle. Looked at a couple. They were no good, and so I found something online. Went up, picked it up, and now it's my new ride. It's noisy, like you were saying when I first called. I was on the highway, um, but
I know. I can't figure out. I got to have a lower, like, I want to lower the volume from the phone. Like, all I can do is either completely mute it or have it full volume. And I haven't figured that out. A lot of things I figured out, but that's one of the challenges. But it would be nice because if I could have you at very, very low volume, no one else would hear it and it wouldn't disturb me. But I'm still having trouble with that for some reason.
I was getting around on a bicycle for a few days. I would go I would go from my house which is in Seaside, to like Monterey, Del Monte Center. My wife wanted a bunch of stuff from the farmer's market for Thanksgiving, so I went out there. And then I had to go to Pacific Grove to a job, and it's not an e-bike; it's just like a regular bike. And it felt pretty good, but it was getting old, getting around like that. You know, my work is all over the place, and I wasn't able to do like, jobs that I was able to basically do electrical jobs where you can just, throw what little equipment you need in a bag and, go troubleshoot something. And it was, so I didn't call in the show 'cause I wasn't listening. I was like, my days were full. I was getting up early because it takes a while to get around like that. So, but now I'm glad I got a truck and I'm rolling again. So,
well, dude, I really appreciate your taking the time. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and a great weekend. I'm going to let you go, John, because you know what? I got to tell you, I've been feeling a little bit weak. I'm going through something right now. I don't know. Maybe it's long COVID. I do expect, I'm not like feeling sick exactly, just sort of fatigued. So I want to get this over at 1 sharp and then take a break for a little bit.
Get your iron level checked.
Yeah, you sound like my wife and my mother together. Have you been speaking to them? Because I've been hearing.
No,
that.
you don't need your doctor to call that one in. You can get on Quest and you can order your own iron ferritin test. And if it's low, like, do you take aspirin every day?
No, I try to take as few meds and anything, ingest as little as possible.
That's what taking aspirin every day. I'm supposed to take it every day, but I don't because it drops my iron really low, and I start feeling weak, like that, fatigued. That's the first thing I feel when my iron starts dropping is
tired.
Is fatigue.
Yeah,
just tired and fatigued. Your muscles feel kind of spongy. It's a little more difficult going up and down stairs. It's not like you're necessarily out of breath, although you might be, out of breath too. But it's just the first thing I feel when my iron drops is I just start getting weak.
Well, you've just described my symptoms 100%. So who knows? Maybe it is an iron, paucity of iron in my system. All right, John, let me let you go, buddy. Thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. And hopefully I'll talk to you next week. Do want to let listeners know, by the way, that I will be interviewing, Monday we have a Monday with Arlen, and it's always great to talk to him. But I'm also really excited on Tuesday coming up. I'll be joined by Juan Dominguez. And Juan Dominguez is running for Maryland U.S. Senate, and he is a real progressive. He is running on a Medicare for All platform and true economic justice. He is a Navy Academy graduate and a success in business. So he has really an impressive record. And I am very, very pleased that he is actually running on an economic justice platform. So we look forward to Juan Dominguez next week. All right, let's get back to the program. So just finished the discussion of the Israeli evidence in support of destroying the Al-Shifa hospital and attacking other hospitals. And again, that evidence is very, very weak. Do want to talk about some good news. We did say this is Thanksgiving, something to be Thanksgiving weekend thankful for. At least there's a ceasefire right now in the war-torn region of Israel-Palestine. We're very killing fields in Gaza. There's a ceasefire, so that's good news. And I saw this story in the New York Times. Another topic that always, rends my heart is the homelessness problem, that people don't have homes. I think everyone should have a home. Nobody, people often say, well, you're always talking about redistributing wealth. Well, how much, what do we have to do? When do we know we've done enough redistribution? And, a simple answer, because I'll say things like, well, everyone has enough, but nobody has too much. People ask, well, what does that even mean? What does that mean? Well, one thing that you have enough, okay? This is a pretty easy one, I think. And again, I'm open to some argument. I'm open to discussion on everything. But I think when nobody's sleeping under bridges, right? I mean, to me, that's kind of like a priority. Everyone will have enough when no one's sleeping under bridges. And some would say, well, but what about those who want to sleep under bridges? And maybe there are. Okay, I doubt there are very many people who really, truly want to sleep under bridges. Some may have mental illness. Okay, if you really, really want to sleep under bridges, maybe we can identify some public areas where people can sleep under bridges. They wish. But also that we all know that the bridge underneath sleeper always will have a safe place where they can go, put their head down, close a door, where they'll be secure. They have a pet, a dog, a cat, whatever, a bird. They bring that animal, their companion, their loved one, whomever it is, with them. When we get to that place, that will have made a lot of strides, okay? So you say to me, well, what's enough? What's enough? How do we know? Everyone who's their need to everyone, from everyone's ability to everyone based on their need? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying where nobody's sleeping under bridges. And nobody has like more than 2 houses. I can get, you maybe have 2 houses, maybe even 3. You're a member of Congress, you're from California, you have a house in, wherever you live in California, you have an apartment in DC. Certainly makes a lot of sense, right? Because you got to fly 6. What if you're from Alaska? Even more so. Maybe you have a vacation home. I get that. I'm willing to accept, I believe you have to accept some inequality, but everyone's roughly equal. And so what does that mean? Well, someone has 3 houses. How can someone who just lives in an apartment be roughly equal? If the person who has an apartment, who lives in an apartment, also has 2-3 weeks every year where they have total time off, maybe 5 weeks, and they have the opportunity, the ability to travel. Maybe you don't travel to your house that you own, but you get to travel to a nice place. Get away from it all. That's when we start to say, okay, yeah, everyone has enough. No one has too much. So this article by Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times kind of intrigued me. This is from November 22nd. Let me see. I have everything up on your screen except for your date. So let's see if we can get that date up there. It's sort of weird. Like sometimes the slides fit and sometimes they don't. So for the November 22nd, 2 days ago, how's Houston fighting homelessness and money? I understand there's a significant homeless problem in Houston, but I guess it's not as bad as it used to be. I was down in Houston a few weeks ago for a close friend's wedding. The son of close friends was married. Beautiful wedding, had a lovely time. It was outside Houston, actually north of Houston, about 30 miles. It's just a complete sprawl, okay? So for mile after mile, you drive for an hour. You drive from Houston, you drive from the Hobby Airport, which is south of Houston. It's not George H.W. Bush International, which is in the northern section, north of Houston, but you drive from Hobby south of Houston. You can drive an hour through Houston and then into the Houston suburbs, and it's all just sprawl. There's no real center. There's a little, there's some high rises in downtown Houston, but there's really no center. There's really no downtown. And there are homeless people, obviously, in that area, but apparently the number has been reduced. And let's talk about why. Or let's let Nick Kristof from the New York Times explain why. He gives 3 reasons. And so I want to look at those three reasons because I thought this was very interesting. Because we need to figure this out, right? We don't live in a free society if one of those freedoms is that many people exercise is to sleep under bridges. You're not free if you have to sleep under a bridge. You just aren't. So what are the three elements of the Houston reduction significant in the number of homeless? First, the city's strong political leaders herded the nonprofits to work in unison rather than competing. Now, that is a really good thing, right? Because there's a lot of groups. I know in D.C. we have the Associated Catholic Charities. We have Jewish charities. We have non-denominational charities all trying to help homeless people. And it's really good if they're organized by some overarching institution like the city and, directs them. So you guys work on providing shelter, right? And you work on making sure that those shelters have enough food, and you work on making sure that the shelters are clean, and you work on making sure that everyone knows where they can go to sleep. So yes, that's a great answer, right? I really like that. The city herded the nonprofits so that they worked in unison. That's really, really important. Absolutely. You don't want to have duplicative efforts. You don't want to have efforts that leave out important aspects of providing homes, shelter for homeless people. And again, that could easily happen, right? If you have, you don't have the groups making sure that there are homeless shelters in every area where there are homeless people, that's not going to solve the problem. So that's one very important aspect. I'm going to jump to 3. Houston focused less on general help, such as handing out jackets or providing counseling, and more on moving people into apartments and providing ongoing care to keep them housed. So that's critical, obviously. You really do. If you want to make sure you don't have homeless people, you make sure there's enough houses for them. There are enough places for them to live. So those are the 2 keys, as I see it, 1 and 3. 1, the nonprofits work together, and the way they work together is they work together on making sure that there's enough houses for people and that they can get into them, enough homes for them. The second, very, very problematic, and I think this really reflects the neoliberal bias in the New York Times and the control really that advertisers and corporate ownership has. They're only allowed to go so far. So it can't be that we create a society where there's real economic security, economic opportunity for all, and everyone has enough and no one has too much, which would require much higher taxes on the billionaire class who, either own the New York Times, help operate the New York Times, and or advertise in the New York Times. So Christoph can't go that far. He can't go to the logical solution, which is we redistribute wealth. So instead he says, well, the real problem or part of it is that we have too many regulations. You have height limitations. You can't build a skyscraper here. And you've got to have a park there. And you can't have too many buildings that that don't have schools near them. And there has to be enough parking and all that. Instead, let's just go look at like what Houston's done and just build willy-nilly. Anywhere you see a vacant lot, throw up a shoddily constructed, 8-floor, ugly rectangle. I mean, Houston is not pretty. It is not a pretty area, I'll tell you. I mean, physically it's flat and it's burnt out because it's so hot down there and there's oil and all that, which, reduces its appeal also. But the Wild West aspect of it, where you can build anything anywhere, has also contributed to the relatively ugly nature of that area. Austin's very different. Austin's much prettier. Austin is also in a hilly area. There's river. But it's concentrated along the river. It's much nicer. But Christoph is saying, well, I mean, yeah, we want to have the pretty, livable cities, but hey, we also don't want homeless people. So maybe we're better off just letting everybody build wherever they want, let the developers throw up, whatever shack they can, and then we'll have people living in them. It's ridiculous. He shows is that, nobody wants that. And I don't buy for a second that that's a factor. Or if it is, it's the smallest, the least relevant of factors. Christoph brings up how it's so much more expensive in Los Angeles. A house is $820,000 in LA, whereas you can build a single family home that's about the same size for $200,000 in Houston. So this is allegedly, according to Christoph, the result of virtually no zoning regulations in Houston. Now, if you've been to LA looks in a lot of ways like Houston. You drive forever, and you're still in this megalopolis. A lot of it is not pretty. I mean, physically, it's a beautiful area, and you have the ocean, and you have mountains, and all that. But still, the way it was developed with very little, zoning laws, at least in the first 50 years, from I guess 1890 to 1930s, 1940, sprawl like crazy. And yet the prices are, as Christoph points out, through the roof. It's not because of zoning. It's because people really want to live in LA. They don't necessarily want to live in Houston. And because there is a limited amount of space. At the end of the day, you can only go so far outside of LA. And people do. They drive 2-3 hours, sometimes each way to get to work. But that's about the extent. That's as far as you can go. I mean, you'd have to live in Bakersfield. And in Bakersfield, you can build for very, very cheaply. It's just simply a supply and demand issue. It's not a regulations. It's not a zoning issue. People still want to live in LA. And in the desirable areas of LA, housing is extraordinarily expensive. It's not the case in Houston. That's the difference. There's just far less demand. Yeah, there's more supply, but there's more supply actually in LA. There's many more people live in LA than in Houston. But there isn't in Houston more demand for what limited supply there is. So Christoph's just wrong. But he can't call for full bore wealth redistribution, which is the way you solve the problem. Can't do it. Probably he's been read the Riot Act by his editors at the Times. And that's why that's the difference. The difference is Houston doesn't have more demand for housing than it can provide. And the people who have been homeless now are getting places through the coordinated efforts of the city and the nonprofits. That's something that California has to do. But California also just simply has to raise taxes on the billionaires, the many, many billionaires who call California home, has to raise taxes on them very, very significantly, and just use the money to build more homes for the people that don't have them. All right, 240-363-7190 if you want to join me. 240-363-7190. And if you say, well, there isn't room for that housing, if you greatly reduce wealth and income inequality, if you reduce the number of billionaires, or eliminated any billionaires in terms of their net worth, then the price of housing would drop. It would be less expensive because there's a lot of houses and apartments that aren't even occupied right now. There's absentee ownership. If that was addressed, there would definitely be sufficient space for the homeless people in California. But yeah, there also needs to be coordination. So the other story, now I talked about this on Wednesday. Today's Friday. Talked about this on Wednesday, the new blacklist, right? The new Hollywood blacklist. And it's very, very troubling. People can't speak the truth as they see it, and a truth that is very, very well, the evidence strongly supports, such as an argument that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Now, I believe that is fair to say. Some don't. I always caveat, I don't like to use the word genocide because it's so extreme, but in some cases it's appropriate. Seems to me that what Israel's doing in Gaza certainly is fairly called genocide. Whether it is, we can argue that. But it's fairly called that. No one should lose their job for saying that. No one should lose their job for condemning Israel. No one should for doing this. No one should lose their job for saying that the media isn't providing a full accounting of what Israel is doing. Those are all very, very legitimate within the, room. They're not outside the pale positions. I think what isn't a legitimate position is to say, well, Israel's justified. Israel needs to defend itself, so that's why it can kill, thousands and thousands and thousands of Gazans. No, that's not okay. Something else that isn't okay is when our most elite institutions limit, often voluntarily, what you can say, what you can write. I mean, this is an extraordinary failure. Harvard Law Review editors killed an article about genocide in Gaza. So this is what the Intercept. The Intercept calls it genocide. The author of the article, which was submitted in response to a solicitation by the editors of the most prestigious law school, law review, probably in the world. I'll say the world. I don't know, maybe someone who, I guess, Oxford or Cambridge or somewhere like that might say theirs is more prestigious. I don't know. But one of the most, clearly, right? Harvard, it's right there at the top. The editors there made what I think was a good decision, which was to solicit from a Palestinian student, because the law review, as law reviews, they're professors who write for them, but also students write for these law reviews. So the editors made what I believe a very, very appropriate decision, which was to solicit an article from a Palestinian student or Palestinian American student to discuss their view of the legality of Israel's actions and whether they do indeed arise to genocide or ethnic cleansing or whatever term you want to use. Time magazine did an outstanding story on this. I did provide a discussion of it earlier this week. I didn't think this article by Rabia Agbaria was quite at the same level. Okay, I thought the Time magazine article was better, but Rabia Agbaria is a student. Student writing is not always as good as that of a professional journalist writing for a magazine like Time. Could be better. But it was certainly good enough. And there were a lot of reasons Rabia Agbaria, who's an expert, should have had his piece published in the Harvard Review. I mean, again, it was good enough. It's in The Nation if you want to read it. And it's, we say, well, it's good enough, right, Hal? I mean, this is the Harvard Law Review. It should be better than good enough. No. Sometimes you provide articles that maybe it's not the best thing that's ever been submitted in terms of the writing skill or the writing quality or even the power of the argument. But it represents a legitimate, valid viewpoint of people who are being oppressed. So they asked this Palestinian scholar, who is indeed a lawyer, right? So he's not just a student, although he is a student at law school, but a lot of law students are also lawyers. They may be getting a degree in tax or some other, specialty. He's a doctoral candidate, so he's getting his doctorate, not his Juris Doctor, but a doctorate, I don't know, in some other specialty field. He's a human rights lawyer, tried landmark Palestinian civil rights cases in Israel. So who would be better equipped, right? Nobody. This is a true expert in the area of Israeli oppression, of persecution of Palestine. And he wrote them, they said to him, he didn't go to them and say, oh, I want to write for you. They said, we want you to write for us, for the Harvard Law Review, one of the most prestigious law reviews in the world. And so he did. And he submitted it to the Law Review. And after they had asked him for it, they said, no, we're not going to publish it. And they have come up with zero, as far as I can tell, a legitimate argument for just 86ing the story. They did not publish it. Now, you want to read about it? This is, by the way, from these facts come from the internet, this reporting. The Intercept, sorry, not the internet, the Intercept. But you can also read it in The Nation. So the 100 editors of the law, that's a lot of editors, my God, that's too many. The 100 editors, it did not hew to the usual process. 25 said, we've never seen a solicited piece that was revoked by the Law Review in this way. When we ask for something, we almost always publish it. If we don't, there's some very good reason that there's nothing like that here. And it was suppressed because it was a pro-Palestine. It was an anti-Israel voice. That's the opposite of intellectual freedom. That's the opposite of academic freedom. Who should be in the vanguard of fighting for the less fortunate, the unprivileged? I can't think of anyone but Harvard Law. I can't think of anyone but the most elite institute. Isn't that what they're supposed to do? Fine, Michigan Law School. State Law School. They would be beautiful too. No one has the ability, the privilege really, to focus on their time and energy and efforts on people like the millions being bombed in Gaza. No one has the opportunity to do it as well as these students. They're not working full time. They're almost guaranteed a great living when they graduate. But there's the rub. Maybe they're not. Apparently, at least some of the students, the editors who are students, who voted against publication, were scared. They were scared for themselves. And they also claim to have been scared for others. But here you have a situation, ongoing war, right now, that, certainly in my view and many others, violates international law. Who better but Harvard Law Review to point that out? And how better to at least bring that issue to the attention of the people, period, especially the legal community, than in the pages of the Harvard Law Review in an article by a Palestinian lawyer. Especially when there has been no articles, no reports, no law journal pieces by Palestinians. Plenty by Israelis, Israeli scholars, none by Palestinians. And no publication ready, because the editors had said, oh yeah, it's ready to go. It's ready to go. And then stop the presses. Maybe they just wanted to say stop the presses. I don't know. I think more likely the reason it didn't make it into the Harvard Law Review is what we see right here in this explanation, which is so disheartening, so sad. If this is really what it's about, it's just awful. And it does not, in my view, this does not reflect in the least bit well on Harvard law students. I mean, they're cowards. Bottom line, these are the tops. By the way, Harvard Law, incredibly persistent. If you're on the Harvard Law Review, you're like the top of the top. You're going to the top law school, and you were selected to be on the journal of that top law school. It's the absolute cream of the crop. The true elites, the true academic elites. And if you look through history, who has been championing the voices of the oppressed, the marginalized more, certainly the people themselves, but it takes a special kind of person who combines bravery, but also intelligence and good education. So Dr. King, a brilliant man, but also very well educated, had his Dr. Martin Luther King had his doctorate from Boston University. Mahatma Gandhi, he was educated in top, I think it was at Oxford, I believe. I could be wrong. Maybe it was Cambridge, maybe neither, but top schools, right? Indian man from the Brahmin class who ultimately, and he had his issues, right? I mean, not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But ultimately, more than anybody else, helped free India from the colonial shackles of the Brits. Brilliant man, spoke with extraordinary moral clarity, extremely well educated. So who should we be looking to besides Harvard and its top students? But now they're afraid of the consequences. We worked too hard to risk our future. Oh no, I'm sorry about those poor Palestinians getting murdered, getting killed. Sorry about this war-torn region, but I got to worry about my future. I can tell you right now, they don't have to worry about their future. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't get a job with some conservative firm. Maybe you wouldn't get a job with some labor-busting law firm. I could see that. You find plenty of work. But they're scared. And there's also a concern. I don't know who expressed this concern. I would like to know. The blowback would discriminatorily target editors of color more than others. I have no reason to believe that's true. I don't believe that. But if that was a concern, okay, it's fair. We don't want others from marginalized communities to be targeted. But I mean, shouldn't they be standing together? Shouldn't editors of color who, at least the implication here from the Harvard students is they're also victims of injustice, just like the Palestinians are, who are also, I guess, more of color. I mean, a lot of them look exactly like the Israelis. I can't tell the difference, but okay, they're considered more people of color than the Israelis. This is called colonization. I think it's fair to call it that, what Israel's doing to Palestine. So shouldn't these editors of color, more than anyone else, you would think, because they themselves have been victimized by economic injustice, by racism, wouldn't you expect them to be standing with others who are facing the same injustice, only far worse, right? I mean, these editors of color of the Harvard Law Review certainly can look forward to a lot of wealth, privilege, security. If they don't have it now, they'll be Harvard Law grads who were on the Harvard Law Review. They can pretty much write their ticket in law. So they are in a much, much, much more, they're privileged. And the people of Palestine are being killed. They're in concentration camp. What is fundamentally a concentration camp along the sea, and being killed. So I would have hoped, I wouldn't be surprised if many of those editors of color are supporting the Palestinians. But it may well be that some even white editors argued, well, we don't want our fellow editors or colleagues to be. It's not for ourselves that we're worried. It's for them. Who knows? Maybe that they really believe that. In the end, sometimes you just have to put aside your own, not survival, not some type of, security, but say, hey, I'm going to get mine. A lot more than that. It's time for me to stand up for those who are being truly oppressed, truly victimized. That's what I would love to see from Harvard Law. And obviously, we're not seeing it because they were too hard to risk their future. All right. I'll be back Monday. Have a great weekend.